and do your thing. Let's give it to Angel. Angel, you take Angel. What you got?
Yeah. So I would say at Beyond Trench is one of the focal points of our work, and what we're trying to build out now is we've been hypothesizing about how mass incarceration not only impacts like our life expectancy, but like our communal longevity, right? And so I think that for us, it's important to talk about mass incarceration and the connection to Black folks. Okay, I think our brother B just joined us again.
Keep rocking. I got him. I got him. Keep rocking.
Okay, cool. I think we are trying to not only just make the direct connection to how mass incarceration impacts the individual life, but also impacts like our communal longevity, and what that means like when we're just in proximity to criminalization. And so when we look at not only our material conditions being impacted by mass incarceration, right, but also the extraction of like individuals from families, from communities, we start to really understand how detrimental and how it's also going back to what Dr. Wendy was saying, how this is a direct result, right, of what's been happening since Black people have been in the United States through chattel slavery. So I think for us, we not only just want to bring the conversation of incarceration to the forefront, right? But we also want to be shifting the conversation to abolition, right? So people can understand what one it looks like for Black people to be free in this lifetime, but also having people who are directly impacted, right? Like we believe in survivor-led movements, and so formerly incarcerated folks and folks currently in the trenches right now, naming what the conditions would be and like what it would look like for us to be free. And I think to answer the second part of the question about like why should we be talking about the process, I think that people don't really understand the impact of incarceration on our time, right? And I think that when we really start to look at, you know, just from the initial interaction, say this for a scenario, initial interaction getting pulled over by the police, right? Minutes can feel like hours, right? And so if we think about how that impacts the body, how that impacts the nervous system, right? Having to go through that entire cycle of either being convicted, having to go to court, and then having to deal with the repercussions, right, and the punishments of that. Um, I think that when we talk about like our actual time is at risk, we start to look at reentry really differently, and we also make sure that we're not only just looking at it differently, but providing people what they need. I think like when we talk about reentry, especially like in the nonprofit industry, folks are or they shy away from like direct services, right? Or making sure that money is going directly in the hands of the people who have been impacted or coming in or coming out. And so I think that it's important for us to constantly be challenging that, and that's what we do with our work. So I'll pass it to whichever one of you all would like to follow up with that.
So I think it's really important for incarceration to be a part of a conversation. Reentry, is it a reentry? Is that what happens when we do it, right? For us to be having these larger conversations, because it's impossible to talk about liberation without touching mass incarceration, especially since we are the most incarcerated, since the historical impacts of slavery, of the transatlantic slave trade, of that trip across the water here, and the, you know, postbellum, when after the Civil War and the criminalization of Black folks, and still the need for labor, right? Still the need for labor. So we have to just unapologetically say that it's slavery. So we just need to name it and stop calling it mass incarceration, right? Like stop putting a skirt on a nasty thing. It's slavery. Let's just say what it is. It's, I mean, chattel slavery, right? You get a day to sign out of prison, right? You get a day, some people, right? If you don't have life, but then you serve life on the outside. 44,000 collateral consequences say that you serve life sentences once you have a number. You serve a life sentence. You don't ever escape this system. So in one way or another, your life is going to be permanently connected with the carceral state. So I think it's really important for us to have a real look at what it is. I think a part of what was done to our ancestors, the stripping of who we are, right? Making us into beasts, right? Like making Black folks into less than humans so that it could be justified, right? So that in the God we trust nation and all of these things, that they could literally exploit Black folks and be okay with it, right? So that they could sleep at night and still hold their moral compass very, very tight. And they did this by labeling us, right? By criminalizing us. Birth of Nations, you think about the work that was put into the criminal, right? If you think about it, as a Black person, you cannot have a separate conversation about being liberated without facing the hugeness, the giantness, of mass incarceration. You cannot have a conversation and do that. And when we talk about reentry as a community, we use the term justice impacted because communities are impacted. When the brightest of us are disappeared into jail cells, when they're the most talented of us are taken away, when we are coming home and women who have served 20 years cannot reproduce because they've aged out of that period, that's a reproductive justice issue. Incarceration is a movement issue overall. There is not one part of movement. If we're talking about labor, if we're talking about anything, there is nothing that we could fully have a conversation about without bringing justice impacted folks into the conversation. Because again, these are communities. These are people who serve time in jail, prisons. These are people who may not have served time in jails or prison, but have felony convictions. These are people who have been in the back of a police car, because that does not, you don't get rid of these things, right? You don't get to unlearn, unbe justice impacted because it's not sexy. It's not sexy, but you don't get to unbe it. So the conversations must be had for us to really think about liberation in a whole way, because right now we are thinking of liberation with arms and a brilliant brain, but where's the legs? How are we gonna get free, y'all? All the legs are locked up.
You brought it home. Dr. Williams, did you want to add to that? Because if not, then I'll throw it to the second question. But Bridget, I just want to highlight that myself now, when you started saying we shouldn't even speak about mass incarceration anymore, that we should just use the term slavery when you talked about the slave trade up until now, that's exactly what we are. We're still enslaved, right? And I want to talk a little bit about how do we break those chains. But Dr. Williams, why is it important? Well, no, I did that one. What does the process of reentry look like and feel like currently? And if you can just answer that first part of that question, and then the second part I'll throw to the rest of the group. But what does the process of reentry look and feel like currently?
I would say, going back to what my sis said earlier, talking to folks who are directly impacted to know what that experience, to know the experience. So I've never been incarcerated in the formal way in this country, so I don't know. But what I'll say in relation to that word reentry, I'm having a reaction to it, so I'm just going to say it out loud. And that is like, how could you reenter something that you never exited? So if we are thinking about
Say that one more time, Doc. Say that one more time.
How can you reenter something that you've never exited? So I think that Michelle Alexander wrote that book, The New Jim Crow, 2011. It's been some years now, but she talked about how the NAACP, how Black people turned their back on Black folks who were getting incarcerated, who were being targeted by systems and put into jails because They didn't want to be associated with this made up thing called the criminal. Right. So respectability politics said, oh, well, they must have did something bad. They went to jail. Now we all know that that's like, I could go to jail today. Any one of us we don't have to do anything but sneeze, breathe, be living, take somebody to the baseball park, whatever the case may be. We could just be living our regular little beautiful Black lives and end up in, in jail because we are targeted. And so, and that's just the case, right? And so we see that with a lot of, you know, the number of videos that have come up when folks don't make it home from, hello?
Bernard, can you please? Bernard, Bernard, you are off.
Oh,
What's up, brother?
it's okay.
Hello, CJ.
Mute yourself. Thank you.
Oh,
All right, keep going, Dr.
so
Williams.
technology
Thank
goes, but anyway, just to say that, like, you know, we see when folks don't make it home because the unwarranted stop or the exaggerated circumstances that then, you know, create the context and their lives are stolen or taken, they've been murdered by the state, by our police systems and you know, structures. So I think that's it. And so I feel like we might like to think that we live external or that we have more rights or abilities, but the reality is that I don't think you can re-enter a place you've never left. I think you're here. And I also feel like when we talk about processes of reentry, what I think about is psychological slavery, because I think that one of the things in that I'm taking that line for mental slavery, you know, Bob Marley, emancipate yourself from mental slavery, none but ourselves can free our minds, Marcus Garvey, right? So like the idea that like, that we're always on guard for if someone can take our freedom, that it's possible to take our freedom, that we're always in mind around that, then we're psychologically encaged anyway, let alone though, when you actually had the real physical life experience of having been placed behind bars and all the indignities and attacks on one's integrity that comes along with that. I do think about what reentry, what does it mean to re-enter? What does it mean to come out and be in the world after having lost time? Bree talked about, you know, coming out and, you know, being, you know, having as a woman missed the childbearing years. You know, my father, like I told you all already, had been incarcerated innumerable times, again, around drug addiction, selling things like that. But the reality is that then I didn't have a father impacting and implementing on my life, and our world didn't have a vision for how to support people through addiction so they could still show up and be in relationship to family, right? And to nurture and support that piece, because we all need our family. We all need all the, you know, we all need the relationships that come of it. So I think that when we talk about the impacts of reentry, it's our person, whoever it is, you know, coming out and trying to make sense of the world as it is, as they've lost time. But it's also around what it means to let someone reenter. And so as a community, how do we wrap our arms around? Do we wrap our arms around? What ways do we lock people out of being able to participate? And so how does all this then play on a person's sense of self, sense of safety, sense of, can I really be out here and do things in a different way? Can I live? What do I have to continue to watch, you know, watch my back for? We haven't even begun to talk about the probation system and all the ways in which, and there's a whole industry and that an industry around corruption of managing the Black body. And that is why when Bree talks about it being like current day slavery, if we think about it as the management of Black bodies and Black labor, then it is the same dynamic with different names.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. We're gonna pause the questions because I don't know how long I got this brother. I don't know how long I got him. So while I got him on the screen, Brother Bernard, can you give us your pronouns, your names, and also
Hello, CJ. Hello, everyone. It's a very difficult past few minutes, you know, and I don't know, but like I knew I was gonna speak, you know. I prepared so well for this, and somehow I started having technical glitches coming from nowhere, you know. But I am determined to speak because we can talk about re-entry liberation without me telling my story. You understand? Because I am a perfect example of what human liberation could be. My name is Mwanya Bernard. I am Nigerian, born into a humble family from the eastern part of Nigeria, raised by a classroom teacher singly, and I grew up in the hands of my mom, who instilled a lot of discipline, strong character, and a lot of spiritual liberation in me. You know, it formed a major part of my upbringing. You understand? And I have just been 1 year in the United States. You understand? And I came in contact with bed business miraculously, and since then, it's been transformation upon transformation, and that is why I was determined to speak in this conference. You understand? And unfortunately, I didn't hear the beginning part of the whole thing, but I must say something. In one of our training in bed business, uh, there was a day when the executive director asked me if I was justice impacted. I almost answered no until I thought about the question, and I'm like, justice impacted? Because I know that one way or the other, one person in your life, maybe your loved one, has been incarcerated in one way or the other without you knowing. You understand what I'm saying? So um, sometimes we talk about people that are just formally incarcerated or incarcerated. What of people that are positioned for incarceration? What do I mean by position for incarceration? Position for incarceration is when you are in a community like the community I have come to experience here in the United States, being in the Black community. I've just been in a Black dominated environment since the past 1 year. And I have taken time to study what is happening. And I found out that most times, most of the youth out here are positioned for incarceration. And that's that is something that touches me so strongly, and I always speak about it, my folks down here. I'm like, you all need to be very careful because you have all been positioned for incarceration. CJ, I give you an example. We have a lot of gun violence going on here in the United States. CJ, do you know that an average of 30 Black Americans die every day by guns? And a whooping sum of 110 experienced non-fatal injuries. This is a data I got from the Alliance for Gun Responsibility. CJ, it is something that touches us. If you are not a witness in a gun scenario, somehow you are a part of it. And somehow you end up in jail. Let's talk about the immigrants in this country. CJ, we all know what is happening in the borders of the United States. We are all comfortable here, but I, coming from Africa, have experienced, and I have also had friends who are right now in the border of the United States. There is no day in this country that at least a total of 10,000 immigrants are let into this country. CJ, let me tell you, do you know that most of the immigrants who come into this country do not have the ability to walk? That is being positioned for incarceration. They do not have the ability to drive. And folks have to take care of their family. They have to take care of their kids. That is position for incarceration. I am a living example. I came into this country devastated. I came into this country demoralized. I had 3 children with a very beautiful wife who has always been very supportive of my dreams. I was a former a politician back home in Nigeria who struggled so much for the emancipation of my people. Unfortunately, we understand how politics works in Africa. We had our own issues back home to the extent that I escaped assassination twice in a period of 1 year. I had to live with my family. And when I got to the United States, as devastated as I was, I didn't know where to start from. I didn't know my left nor my right. But I had something inside me, spiritual liberation. And that is what I want to talk about mostly. We often refer to spiritual liberation as the spiritual awakening and enlightenment. It is profound and transformative experience in which an individual transcends their ordinary sense of self and attains a higher state of consciousness. CJ, I want to explain what I mean by state of consciousness with the bad business family. When I got in contact with
Oh, I'm sorry.
I didn't know how many.
Give me 1 minute.
Give me 1 minute. We go.
Mute your,
I'm sorry,
mute
now,
your,
I was backward.
mute
I
your,
didn't
mute
know
your,
what was
mute your video real quick.
Mute your video real quick.
I'm hearing the echo. All right, I'm gonna let you explain that, but thank you for breaking down all of that. But we're gonna give you that time to break it down towards the end where you can break down your experiences. But we want to bring in some of the other folks on the panel to keep it moving. Okay, not to cut you off, but we want to keep it. We want to keep it popping. We want to keep it popping. So my next question, I'm gonna go to as a formerly incarcerated person, what was it like navigating re-entry into community while also being a leader within the movement? And again, I want you to hold that thought, B, because we will be coming back so you can break it down for us, but want to just keep it on a theme, and got these questions that we want to ask the panel. So anybody, Bree, I know that you were formerly incarcerated. Angel, you spoke about being arrested during some of the protests. So I'll give you that question.
Wow, like reentry, like I guess I really don't subscribe to that word. I guess because yeah, really, like I didn't leave Earth. So where am I reentering? So, but I do believe that it's challenging. It's more so challenging, not from white folks, right? Or not from non-movement folks. That is kind of expected, right? And when I came home, I served 10 years in the Georgia Department of Corrections, came home 2018, March 30th. So when I got home, I stumbled into movement. I had not known that I had been organizing pretty much like while I was incarcerated. I had no name for the things that we were doing. We just became each other's family. And I know that if my family wasn't good, I wasn't good. We would do mutual aid. We would collect soups and Debbie's and all of the things for people who did not have them. I remember some of my oldest friends splitting soups with me when I had nothing. So we always were in, community economics in there. Like there are principles that I practiced that I did not have verbiage for, right? But coming home and discovering movement and to listen and to learn and to become politicized, and then to see the hypocrisy that it didn't count for me. It didn't count for me. Like it didn't count for me, all of the beautiful things that I read, all of the great teachings that I got taught. People still clutched their pocketbooks. People still got uncomfortable when I was around. Like Angel mentioned, folks still didn't want to give me bread. Like they didn't want to share resources with me. They didn't want to put it in the hands of people who were directly impacted. And it's really important for us to unpack why, because we all have been socialized, right? There's this great book that I'm reading. It's Brainwashed by Tim Burrell. And it talks about just all of the resources that was put into brainwashing us, and brainwashing not just us, but white America, right? Everybody is like brainwashed in a way to be in this hamster wheel that we are in with one another. But I think the most harmful things is when it's other movement folks that exclude you, that talk about mass incarceration, and there's not one person that's justice impacted in your organization, that you've invested in your back end. What does your back end look like? Not just your front end. Front ends are real cute, but what's in that engine? What's underneath that hood? So like that has been the most harmful for me, like to be transparent. As far as re-entering, I think that society like has programmed us in this way. So it's it hurts, but I understand. And that is why I am always in the mud. I'm willing to, make and create new things. I think that's important.
Thank you, thank you. Angel, did you want to hop in there? Talk about your experience?
Yeah, so I got arrested and went to jail when I was 16 years old in Birmingham, Alabama. And I would say that when I got out, just to talk about like the conditions for me. So when I was in high school, right? So of course, like the shame that I had of like being arrested in front of my classmates, my peers, and things like that. And then also already being in the alternative school, right? So that was interesting. And then the impact that it had on my family dynamics. I'm an only child, right? And so my mom really doing the best that she could to really, position me for success as a single mother. I think that it really just showed that like, there's only so much individuals can do. And so like I was lacking a lot of community care. And so then after that, not being able to really complete normal high school, and then from there having to work, basic jobs, and being in situations of like a lot of violence. So after I was incarcerated, I experienced a lot of sexual violence. And so I think that experienced a lot of sexual violence and then also being harmed by the criminal justice system, it really positioned me for even more harm socioeconomic wise, right? So I experienced a lot of homelessness. I experienced a lot of that harm and hurt that Bree is talking about. I experienced a lot of that with organizations because what was legitimate to me of like how I, my lived experience and how I understood the work and how it was politicized and how I showed up, wasn't always as legitimate for those like who had an academic background, right? And who knew how to talk in the different spaces or, and for me, I'm always very leery of the people who have a lot to say, right? And that's because of the communities that I'm a part of, right? We have to do a lot of watching to understand how we can intervene. And so I got married at 19. So, being incarcerated at 16 and then being married as a teenager also opened up a lot of different doors, right? So I have 3 young children, had them very young, and didn't get stable housing until like 2020. Right. And so all of those years of experiencing like, homelessness, being in movement, right. Being around people who had like the resources to pass on, but also those people also being in proximity to power. And I think that people don't understand that we're in movements where like power has to be negotiated, right. And you have to dare to like really negotiate power with the people who have like these lived experiences. So overall, I would say for me, reentry looks like a understanding of my positionality in the world, and then also really trying to get my footing, not only as somebody who's trying to experiment with like what could be for tomorrow, but also trying to build that for myself and like trying to figure out like where my safety is.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for sharing that. And again, like from my heart, the fact that y'all had to spend time in jail and the reentry was so traumatic is just disheartening to me. My dad went to jail for murder, and just watching how he was crucified in trial, a man who never did anything, and watching him have to reenter. But several of my cousins have been in jail, and watching them have to reenter has been disheartening. So my heart goes out to you. Thank you for being in the struggle still and fighting for those who are still behind bars and those who are fighting to find jobs, find housing, and to reenter. But as you said, Doc, it ain't reentry for something that we never exited. So I was listening. Let's keep it moving though. So Doc, I'm gonna start with you, and then Bernard, you hop on and add on to it. But my question, Doc, is what role do you think that organizations committed to liberation should play in supporting their staff, volunteers who are impacted by, for this, we're going to say mass incarceration, but we're saying slavery for this chat, for mass incarceration directly or indirectly? What role should organizations committed to liberation play in supporting staff and volunteers who are impacted by mass incarceration, directly or indirectly. We're going to shoot it to you, Dr. Williams, and then Bernard, you
Mhm.
chime in.
Yeah, I think you should hire people who have been formerly incarcerated, because then you would have the perspective on the staff, and that they, and for positions of leadership and strategic direction and vision for the institution or the organization. I feel like it's about leadership. My sense is that, I told you I live in the Bay Area, a lot of very well-meaning progressive and liberal people who want to do the right things, but they want to be comfortable. And I think one of the things that I'm hearing from my fellow panelists here is that, it's, in some ways, what I want to say, that like we're often talking about white folks and white privilege, but we have to talk about the other types of privileges that we are all sort of chopping out the little bit for, and the crumbs that we're settling for, and what settling for those crumbs does for the rest of the whole cake of everybody else out there who we are trying to get a little bit of a piece of a pie and leaving others. I feel like there's a sort of thank God it's not me kind of thing that people go through. So when we're talking about other organizations that are, say they're focused on liberation and freedom and abolitionist perspectives, a lot of times they just read a nice book and they are using the language of, the most recent thought leader, or whatever the case may be, the person that they respect, the person who probably actually went through some things. And so they're like, oh, I like the passion of their language. I like how that makes me sound. Maybe it makes me sound more woke. I don't know if people use that word anymore, but I think you know what I'm getting at, right? And so that's very different intellectually, and here I am, that person, I'm the intellectual, talk a lot person, educated person on the call, right? I get it. So like that, it's theoretical, and theoretical is good. It's nice to have a framing, but it has to be, tethered to reality, to praxis, to lived experience. And so I feel that what organizations can do is actually hire and have in leadership positions folks who actually have direct experience, because that is where you're going to again get the strategic direction that is informed by different experiences of containment and surveillance. We just said there's a myriad of them, and all the rest. And the particular experience of containment and surveillance that happens when you are behind bars, or, even with these reentry programs where they still kind of keep, a lot of surveillance using the technology. I know we haven't gotten there yet, but I'm assuming that we will at some point. Like the uses of technology to surveil the ones that we participate in, and or the ones that are used for folks who are in reentry programs, again, all of it meant to kind of keep this sense that you're not really away, you're not really free. And so again, that's the psychological burden of sort of kind of being mentally and psychologically incarcerated too. So I think that at the very minimum, hire people and have their thinking and have their vision and perspective and strategy be a part of what that organization is doing, or at least that around the table, as we're talking about, whether it's school to prison pipeline, whether it's talking about push out Monique Morris's work, all the things, having people at the table who know all sides of an issue actually just makes your organization and your goal achievement stronger, or your ability to achieve the goals that you say you have. And if not, then you always have these like conversations where you feel a little bit ashamed, because somebody with more direct experience who knows what they're talking about can always, show you that your slip is showing, because you haven't covered it all. And I think to be fully inclusive means to cover it all and to bring everybody into the conversation who can truly inform and lead.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Bernard, your thoughts?
Thank you, CJ. My thoughts is very simple. When you have people who are passionate about your vision and mission, it makes it easier for any organization to thrive. I was speaking about the state of consciousness, and I thought that was where you guys are at the moment, but I wanted to speak about the strength I have seen in the people I work with right now, which are the crew in bed business. You understand? They brought me out from my quagmire. I didn't know who they are until I heard their story. And I began to wonder in myself, how can somebody who was subjected to that kind of captivity in prison for 30 years, 10 years, come out knowing him or herself even better than before he went to prison? You understand? And I had to buckle my mind up. And I'm like, if these people can achieve whatever they are achieving, that means my own case is even nothing compared to what they have seen. Like I was saying, when I talk about passion, it's passion to do the right thing. It's passion to make change or to create change in your present environment. When I came into this country and I studied my environment, I understood how things work. And I keep saying how people are positioned for incarceration in the United States. Because I keep hitting it up because I feel like every day, whenever I have situations and I try to interview people who were culprits or who did the wrong thing, and I found out one way or the other, it was caused by the system they saw themselves in. I try to do 5 things, which is the 5 points I want to talk about regards to spiritual liberation, which was what helped me to stand my feet in this country. Self-transcendence, my inner peace, my wisdom and insight, my compassion and love, and my moral and ethical growth. These 5 things were 5 things which helped me to develop who I am right now and who I want to be. How did these 5 things help me? It is very simple. I met bad business because I decided upon myself that I am in a new country. I dropped everything ego about myself and I decided to volunteer from one place to the other. I volunteered in different organizations until one very good day, a young man knocked on my door and he gave me a leaflet encouraging Black people to vote in Georgia. And I asked him a question. Hello, sir, is this a volunteer job? He told me yes, that I can volunteer. And that was how I came in contact with bad business until the executive director was able to discover my case. And like she showed me that compassion and love, and I was able to find my feet. Now, finding my feet and seeing what these people are doing in this country, I also put in my energy, to join their vision and mission to try and make the society better. You understand? And that is where we are at the moment.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Angel, Bree, do y'all got any thoughts on that before we keep it moving? How y'all feeling though? Y'all still with me? People out there, we can't see you, but we're hoping that y'all are getting some good information and y'all taking notes. This recording will be available for you at some time so you can go back and listen to it. But did Bree or Angel, did y'all got anything that y'all wanted to add before we keep rocking?
I think we could keep rocking.
Let's go with it. Cool, cool, cool. So my next question is, do you think that organizations reflect or mimic the culture of punishment and policing? And if so, what is one experience that you can share? And Doc, we know that you're not really in an organization, but if you can talk from your lens of the culture of punishment and policing that organizations reflect what we're seeing. Let's go to you, Angel.
So I definitely think that there are some organizations that reflect and mimic culture of punishment. I wouldn't say all because I haven't been a part of all organizations to know that, to speak from that experience. But the organizations that I have seen or have been looking at, I do think that it is interesting, the innateness to just like go to disposability. And I think that when we talk to a lot of these folks, especially who are leading these organizations, right, going back into like the really convincing narrative, right, that we're all family, that we're all in this together. But in moments of conflict, right, instead of being able to actually have or to build like an ethic of love, we go through disposability, right, and building disposability politics, right, and even more so, especially when we see different leaders, right, come into different proximities to power, especially in our field, because we do a lot of mutual aid and guaranteed income, right? People actually blocking different resources, right? Maybe because of a a misunderstanding, or, you know, not being values aligned. Like that's something that people always talk about, is being values aligned, right? But don't ever really talk about like what it really means to keep it real with one another, right? Or really, you know, if you see me doing something wrong and you see me, especially as somebody who is supposed to be a leader in movement, I think that there is supposed to be like a certain culture of care. And when we talk about Black folks, especially Black folks who are surviving these current systems, for the immediate response to be to dispose of them, right, or to go into, you know, these HR practices, right, that protect the business but not protect the person, then, right, we're emulating the same thing that we're trying to run away from or recreate. And so I would say, I would charge it to organizations and organizational leaders, to really talk to not only the people that you're hiring, but the people who have brought you on, right? And to talk about their experiences of being canceled, of being pushed out. How do you rebuild from that, right? When this is something that you love so much, or these are the people that you love so much. And like, how can we continue to like create, I would say like silos of safety, right? Because like not every organization is a safe place. Not everyone is a brave place for you to even be, you know, confrontational. I feel like that's something that has been said about me, and something that, you know, in certain spaces has held me back, is people being like, you know, well, she's reactionary. But me having to react is also a part of my survival. And so I think that when you start to understand people more, when you start to build authentic relationships, you really start to challenge like what liberatory workplace practices can look like. And my experience is, you know, I think overall as a young person, one, making mistakes in movement, and not really having, folks to be like, hey, that was a mistake, but I still love you. We still want to resource you. We still want to help you get to where, you know, you want to be. We still need you. I think that is something that has been detrimental to my growth, but also something that has inspired me to, bring in other young people who get casted away, to also lean into the mistakes that I made to right those wrongs. I think like, you know, being in restorative justice, we start to learn like accountability has to be consensual. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's hard to tell me that I'm wrong when I'm hungry and I'm having to fight up against all of these things. You know what I'm saying? And I might have misspoke, or I might have done the wrong thing, but also thinking, you know, my survival is attached to this, right? And so, you know, I think evaluating how real it is for some of us, especially those of us who have lived experience, we deserve a lot of grace, and space and movement.
I don't know about y'all listening, but I'm enjoying this conversation. I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a lot. I'm gonna rewind this back and go listen to this again when we finish. Doc, jump in there, Doc.
So
Dr.
you see
Williams,
me,
jump in there.
I'm like getting excited because I feel
I'm
like what
telling you, like,
you said is so
woo.
spot on. And that's what I mean by like, how could you re-enter something that you've never exited? Because what she's talking about is, you know, like it makes me think a lot about young people in schools and the ways in which they're already surveilled, like they're, you know, the culture, let me just back in. One of the organizations, one of the institutions that really has this culture of surveillance and punishment are schools. And the pipeline is set up by those practices and policies that push young people out, that the zero tolerance for a teenager is stupid. Teenagers, young people make mistakes and they need to be able to, or they're just learning and they're just being human. And to make problematic or misbehavior their being a child is really difficult to witness. And you watch the dichotomy when, say, a young white boy shoots people in Wisconsin and people have empathy for him and buy him Jack in the Box. And when a young Black boy is murdered, right? But this is true, he's murdered and we need to criminalize him and say, well, you know, he got in a fight when he was 10. Yeah, a lot of people do get, it's called a play, you know, whatever. So that idea of the over surveillance, the punishment culture, we learn it very early. And so that's what I mean by the ways in which, even as a young person, I didn't even realize how much it was in and on me. I've never, again, spent a day in jail, but I've always spent every day managing myself and my behavior because I knew there were consequences for me. There just are. There just always are. And when I started to see the ways that we would begin to talk to the young people in my family around them looking over and protecting themselves, because we began to realize they could be doing something legitimately wrong, and they could be doing nothing, and it doesn't matter. And like that is, for me, that's the violent culture of surveillance and punishment, because you're punished for being human. You're punished for being human. And I'm sorry, I'm getting really excited about it, and not in a good way. But
Catch the Holy Ghost, catch the Holy Ghost. Snap. We got
Catch it, but it's true, because and it's the same thing, because that's the dynamic that's the dynamic that we set up with workplaces and human resources departments, as Sis was just saying, right? That, like these performance reviews and things like that. Who is more likely to get that kind of behavior response and have to go through that kind of reporting? Who is most likely to have their behavior and their ways of naturally being, the way our hair naturally grows out our hair, for example, being a reason for maybe receiving some kind of punishment at work or pink slip or whatever the case may be. For Black people, for Black folks, it is being punished because your Blackness is punishable, period. You were born a crime, as Trevor Noah said, right? In the US, being born Black is being born a crime. And there are just newfangled ways of figuring out how to extract labor from you and place you within confines and boundaries, because people don't want to deal with you unless you're making the money.
Thank you. I want to throw a little monkey wrench in, because I know y'all got questions that was given to y'all, but I want to make this a little more conversational real quick. So me and Bree and Bernard were recently on Franklinton, North Carolina, which housed the rebellious slaves, and they used that plantation to break the rebellious slaves. So they used practices to break. So I want to talk about, y'all tell the people that's listening, like, what are some of the practices they use now to break those who are rebellious and want to fight back against the system, those who are trying to do the right thing once they have served their time and they're trying to be in the community. What are some of the, I want folks to start thinking of some of the psychological ways and some of the ways they do through policy to try to break our spirit, to make us hopeless. If anybody wants to take that one.
Well, I guess I'll take a stab at the monkey wrench. So I think policy is a clear way. Just the fact that in the Constitution that the 13th Amendment makes it possible for there to be slaves. I mean, it says it. I'm not making it up. Folks can pull it up. It literally says that when Black folks were freed, everybody was free except for anyone that came in contact with the law. So what did they start doing? They started making all of us get in contact with the law because they needed slaves, right? So capitalism is the number one way to funnel people through a system, because this is human capital, right? We are cattle, right? So if as a shareholder, you're looking for for the CEO of your organization to maximize your profits, I couldn't even put a numerical amount on how much money is made from the prison system and how many different corporations have their hand in it. Because this is big business.
You have to guess, B, what would you say? How much?
Trillions. I've actually just went on a website and almost threw up. Starbucks has their hands in it. I'm not gonna call all the people's names.
Give us some, B.
Okay.
We here. Give us some.
Okay, well, Starbucks, United Airlines, it's Michael Jordan, Jordans, Victoria's Secret. It ain't a secret. She using prison labor. He using prison labor. It's not a secret, but this is big business. It's so many of the brands that we love, right? The paint stores. How are they benefiting from prison labor? So this really goes to show that, this country is founded on big business on capitalism, right? Capitalism is what made them go to get free labor from across waters and to continue to perpetuate the harm, even when the transatlantic slave trade was quote unquote over. They morphed that into the domestic slave trade. And when the domestic slave trade was quote unquote over, they morphed it to mass incarceration. So I think that is really important to note, that I'm just gonna keep saying that it's slavery, right? I keep saying that. But
yeah.
but the law is the biggest way that folks, deal with the breaking of slaves. Then I would say media, right? Like the media, the flashes, it perpetuates the criminality of Black folks, right? Like so much so that anti-Blackness is not just with white people. Like there's anti-Blackness in so many different races. And we know we can jump into them, but I won't. But the media, the narrative that prevails, right? And makes anti-Blackness a thing. And and I would also say just the 44,000 collateral consequences that justice impacted people have that keep them separated from even being caretakers of their aging parents, from being moms. Like you can't adopt, you can't, it's so many, it's 44,000 of them. So you can just pick any one of them. And I would say those are those are the things that they do to continue to break us and to make sure that we go back into the system.
And where can we go find out about them 44,000 consequences? Because you said that earlier, and I was trying to Google it, but
Yeah, I'll drop it in. I'll drop it in the chat. I got you covered.
we gonna let y'all know them 44,000 where y'all can go get that at. And real quick though, Dr. Williams, I want to come to you because you mentioned something about, I know that a lot of people we think that mass incarceration or being locked up is just you being in jail. And you mentioned a little bit about wanting to get into the discussion about the other forms of how they keep you in the system.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about how, if you're not in prison, how do they still keep you a part of the system and continue to profit off of you?
I think people may be familiar with like ankle bracelets. That's like one of the common ways that we've been thinking about it. But there, with each of the advances in technology, we have to think of the ways in which it could be misused. And so one of the and for, if you watch any accounts of like how folks try to manage and monitor and track down of the movement of Black folks, during enslavement and even following. So again, that's what those Jim Crow and Black codes are about. They're about policies to continue the policy of enslavement because slavery became illegal. So then the goalposts moved to new laws and new ways of thinking about it. I used to live in Brooklyn for many years, and one of my colleagues and I were talking through these programs that they had for young people. So they weren't putting them on Rikers anymore, or they would get out from Rikers and be on an early and a reentry program. And that's why you do the air quotes, because they weren't able to enter really either. The technology, the surveillance system, the surveilling young people and old people, but I'm thinking particularly of a group of young men who were housed in a halfway house kind of situation and monitored so strictly. You're not really allowed to have real freedom to move about. And so, I mean, that's ultimately what it comes to. So I think that we have these various programs. We call them reentry programs. We have a lot of people in them, but they're not sometimes these systems and these structures, because you're hiring some of the same people who were part of the jailing systems and jails and prisons. They actually are treating folks as if they are in jail and prison, even though they're supposed to be in the process of transitioning into becoming, I want to say, a productive member of society. But again, I don't like that language because I don't think that I don't think the person was ever not productive. I just think they've redeemed wrong in the wrong place and all that. So that's what I meant by that. Just the ways in which, it could be a house in your neighborhood or a community, you don't necessarily know like what those limits and boundaries are on folks. And I would say that it's the reentry, but it's also the probation systems as well that again don't always feel like, and I know we'll see different media portrayals of like the probation officer who's kind of like not really on the the person's side or whatever, but there is some truth to some of these pieces in which, is it to support the individual who's formerly incarcerated to really get their footing and get their feet beneath them and get going in society, or is it to continue to have a watchful eye so you can push them back? And I think the verdict is out in terms of what we actually experience and see in that space.
Anybody want to jump in? Anybody want to jump in about other ways? Bree? Ange?
Yeah, I think one that we can talk about too is like that hypervigilance. I think that a big part of institutionalization is hypervigilance, right? And so thinking about the impact that fear has on just like the nervous system, how you start to build patterns based on, your nervous system being dysregulated because you have to be hypervigilant. And then maybe if you're somebody who, I like how they said it at Bar Business, in position for criminalization, I think that you have to think about like that Black excellence thing, right? And how prescribing to Black excellence is just like a hypervigilance of like not being arrested, right? Or not being criminalized. It doesn't really mean more, they try to sell it as like, this American dream or whatever. But really for us, it's like, we try to perform in these different ways so that we can have just basic freedoms, right? Or what we would consider just like the basic needs being met. And so I think that is one of the things that I think that like onset institutionalization has done to all of us, those of us who have been inside or have not been inside or are just like a part of communities that have been impacted by incarceration. And I also think that the separation of community, I think that folks really don't understand how much we really need each other to not only just be a part of this work, but to like sustain as individuals. And so when we look at how institutionalization continues to like perpetuate this idea of like individualism, right? Like making you be alone, making you be by yourself. And then also like the actual extraction from you outside of your community. And I think that along with the practices, like not only removing you, but then when you are, re-entering or coming back into society, not really understanding like, social interactions, not knowing how to be there, or, not even really being embraced in a way because, again, people are apprehensive, right? Because we've all been like programmed, right? Like, oh, you've done something, but also you don't know like what I just survived on the inside, or people don't understand, like you might be fighting the beast, right? I think a lot of organizers, especially those who maybe come from a different class or academic standpoint, they're fighting the beast, but we have been inside of the belly of the beast, right? And so like we know how the beast functions from the inside and we know what it can do to you. And so further, discrediting that lived experience and coupling that with being extracted from your community, right? I think further perpetuates the othering of Black people who have been like directly impacted or in proximity to.
Thank you. Brother B, we ain't heard from you in a minute.
Yeah, Mr. CJ, when I think about the prison system here in the United States, I feel strongly that it's doing the society more harm than good. And I give you an example. Back home in Nigeria, when people go to jail, the only thing they are authorized to do in jail is to farm. You farm, and the farm produce is sold to the community. That is what they do in jail. And when you have served your time, you come out from jail being able to get jobs because you need to stand your feet and not go back to the crime. But here it's different. I understand people produce products for companies inside the jail. I do not understand whatever initiative they had, to make that way. And they are not even paid well. I understand they are paid less than $1. That is from the articles that I have read. You understand? So I think it is doing the system more harm than good. Even when they leave prison after serving their time, they are not given the same opportunities to get good jobs. Because I have seen companies reject people just because they were formerly incarcerated. How is that helping the society? They will go back to crime. In the little neighborhood that I am right now, I have some friends that were formerly in jail, and I know the kind of life they live now. And sometimes I ask myself question, how was being in jail, being able to help this person to come out of that quagmire he was? Because you separated the person from the family. And there is something else I want the system to also think about. This act of separating people from their family so quick doesn't help the system. It is people, they throw people into jail so quickly in this country, and I don't understand why. And that is why I say people are positioned for incarceration. You understand? And you separate them from their family. What happens to those children when they grow up without their father? In my country, we are a developing nation, but it is different. The jail system in Africa seems to be even better than here. I tell you the truth from the experiences that I have. So I feel strongly that the government needs to look at maybe the way they do things, or the laws guiding their jail system. They need to do a strong review about the whole system. It is doing the society more harm than good.
Thank you, B. Thank you. Coming through with the word. B coming through
TJ,
with
can I
the
say
word.
something really quick?
Of course. I mean, this y'all show. I'm just moderating. Do your thing. Do your thing.
I think what was interesting about what Bernard said was the ability to get resources once you get out. But I also want to talk about like inside of our field, right? Like inside of movements, because I think like we talk about movements, but a lot of like right now our movements is happening inside of a nonprofit industrial complex, right? Which is also like another system that can perpetuate harm to people who are survivors of different criminalizations. What I'm saying is that for me and my experience, having to build up my legitimacy has looked so different, right? And like having to carve out spaces of like places where I can do the work and be trusted to do the work, trusted where my voice and my opinion matters, right? And so like that and understanding that, having to build legitimacy inside of a field that you think because of the rhetoric, right? We're family, it's all Black lives, it's all Black people, but I'm having to build it up, right? Through the help of like, the people who do believe and stuff like that, but that's not even in comparison to the people who have like power to really make material changes, not only for the work that I'm building, but like for collective movement, right? And so I think that has been something that's been very interesting to me, is like, what it means to be legitimate enough to actually be a social change agent inside of this movement and inside of, this time, especially after 2020, when everybody was so galvanized about Black-led movements and things like that. But people weren't always as galvanized about, putting the resources in the hands or even nurturing the leadership development of Black people who have been, intentionally extracted from their communities. So I just, think it's something for us to think about, like who we deem as legitimate, and what is legitimized inside of our movement practices.
Thank you, Angel. So we got about 9 more minutes before we wrap this amazing session. So I got a couple more questions for you. The first question that I got is, and I want everybody to answer this. What examples have you seen or experienced that keep you inspired, that it's possible to fully embody an inclusive values and politics within our organizations and in our movement? So what have you seen? What keeps you inspired to keep you going and embody the values that we've been talking about and the politics we've been talking about?
Well,
Let's go to you.
since I'm off mute, might as well go with me.
Go.
So I'm gonna say, and this is not from a vain standpoint, but I'm gonna say what we're working to create at Bard Business. It keeps me inspired. It lets me know that it's possible. It lets me know that the world that we aspire to see as Black folks who don't believe that cages should be created, don't believe that people should live in cages. I'm very inspired by what we're doing. Though we're not perfect, we're new, but we in these streets, we are out here. And that is how we are able to do some of the things that we've done, because we believe that it's possible. So what inspires me is to see other justice impacted people like me that are here, that's laying it on the ground for other people that are like us. So this isn't from a selfish vein. This is from a vein that we know this work has to be done. There's long nights. There's the difficulties around us being undervalued, under-resourced. We have to over-justify, but our stories are over-abused. And just to be to the point where we just said we're not doing it anymore, and we are going to create a different path, and we're going to be in right relationships with people, and we are no longer going to just allow for ourselves or for our families to be exploited in that way anymore. So just wanted to say, like, thank you all for being on this panel. Like, Angel, thanks for the work that you're doing, everyone, because it's super important to always lend a voice to the fact that it's time out for that. Like, we as justice impacted people, we actually deserve to be here and deserve to take up space like everybody else.
Thank you, Bree. Dr. Williams, what inspires the Dr. Williams?
The babies. I think we started this conversation talking about a sweet pea,
We
and
did.
I think that's where I focus my where I get inspiration, for the work that I do and that we do. I would say also this conversation is inspiring. I feel a sense of empowerment from our panelists, to have taken up the experience and doing something with it that will actually make an impact for other people. When you have been justice impacted and the stigma attached to it, and people are trying to, right, there's a whole rubric of shame and trying to hide and act as if this is not this, or this didn't happen to me, or that kind of thing. That makes everybody more lonely and by themselves. So by stepping up, speaking out, creating organizations that are doing work to address areas that need influence, impact, shift, and change, like that is what's needed, and that's what's necessary. So we were saying, what can organizations do? And yet we have folks right on the call right now who have started those organizations, who are leading those organizations, who are driving the change that we want to see. So I feel like that is very hopeful. Also recognizing that there's a lot of work ahead.
Thank you. Angel.
I would say what keeps me inspired and what we're building at Beyond Trenches is that we don't do the work at all costs, right? I think for us, it's important that we take care of one another. And so being very militant about our mutual aid and when crises happen, because we also hire people who are directly impacted or like in proximity to criminalization. And so knowing who we are going after to like build the work with us, we know that crises happen. And so making sure that we are constantly remembering that we are building this work for us, and we're not doing it for a mission, vision, values. We're not doing it for the next grant to come out. We're doing it to make sure that our people are sustained, and that whatever our liberation does look like in this lifetime, that we were a part of facilitating that. And I think that for me, knowing that, we'll run the organization down to make sure that our people have what they need, not only material wise, but also know that this is not just a place of rest, but it's a place of refuge. Is something that really keeps me going. And I would say also just knowing that I've made it this far, like I'm 27 now, and so it's been 10 years since I was incarcerated and got arrested in high school. I never really could conceptualize my own individual life. And so I think that understanding now that I am living and that there are places, especially for Black women and Black girls, to be safe and to build out is something that keeps me going and definitely continues to fuel not only my rage, but the fruitfulness that I have for the community.
Brother Bernard, thank you, Angel.
Thank you, Angel.
Thank you, CJ. The society is a product of what we give into it. Whatever we give into the society is what the society returns back to us. We all have children. We all have descendants. So we have to do our best to make sure that the society, is in the right direction. I want an environment, I want a community, I want a country where my children will grow up not being afraid of what tomorrow holds. And that's my inspiration. Thank you.
Wonderful. I want to thank all of you for such wisdom. This was such a cool panel. I felt like I was talking to family on a Zoom chat this afternoon. So we got about a minute left, but if you can give me just one word of inspiration that you can give those who were formerly incarcerated or those who are listening to keep them inspired, what word would that be? Oh, and thank y'all for listening and thank y'all for tuning in. Give me a word and we're gonna close out with that. Give me one word to keep those people still keep moving on.
I would say resilience.
I would say worthy.
I would say strength.
Man,
I would say power.
I would say marathon. Thank you so much. We need to do this more often. I don't know how it's gonna shut off, but thank y'all so much for your time. I learned a lot. I'm hoping that you out there learned a lot. If you wanna get those 44,000, please reach out to Bree at Bar Business so she can get you those 44,000.
I dropped it to you. I dropped it in the chat.
Okay,
I always
well,
have receipts, CJ.
got
No
the receipt.
receipts. It's
Got-
it's your chat.
Okay,
Okay.
got him.
I got the stores, Starbucks, all of those good stores.
We got it.
Hairline, Walmart, all of them, they're up in
Well, I
there.
guess
I got it.
hit me up. Y'all hit me up, CJ at c2.org, and I will get you the receipts. I
We'll
will
get
make
you those
sure.
receipts, okay?
Yeah. Yes. So where can they find you? We still rocking. Where can they find you? Shout out y'all
Okay, let me
Instagram,
get out the
y'all
way. It's
email.
right up here on the screen. So we are at BART Business and we are in Mechanicsville. We are in the Dunbar Center. We are in the heart of our people. 89% of these folks here are justice impacted. 88% go back to jail or prison. So we are with our people and we are in Atlanta, Georgia. Everything BART Business on everything, on every platform, TikTok, all of the X, everything. BART Business, big B's, baby.
Angel, where can they find you? Shout it out.
You can find us at blackinmatesmatter@gmail.com or on Instagram at blackinmatesmatter. And if you want to support our work, you can find us on Patreon to become a monthly sustainer at Beyond Trenches.
And Dr. Williams, you do so many things. So what you want them to hit you up for?
drwendywilliams.com and on Instagram at Dr. Wendy Williams.
Wonderful. Thank you all. B, as he said, works with Bar Business. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. And I salute y'all for your work. Thank you. Peace.